Hello and welcome to the Combined Joint Task Force's DCS Refresher Course video series. This lesson is intended for use by members of the HMLA 122 Wolfpack and will cover the DCS UH-1H aircraft. We will begin with the startup procedure. Turn the AC power rotary knob to AC phase and the main generator switch on. Turn this knob to ESS bus and the battery on. Switch the low RPM warning off and the fuel, hydraulics, and trim on. If you notice here on the controls indicator, the throttle is currently in the off position. Throttle up past the idle line and then back down to place it in the starting idle position. Turn your lights to steady and your anti-collision to on. Press and hold the engine start button. We will hold it until the gas pressure is at 40. While we're waiting, we can go ahead and turn on the IFF by right-clicking this rotary knob once. Turn on the nav radio, which is used for ILS and navigation, by right-clicking that knob once. This is your VHF AM radio. Turn it on by right-clicking the left knob once. We can go ahead and release the engine start button. This is your UHF used to communicate with other aircraft. Right-click once to place it in transmit mode. This is your radio selector knob. INT stands for intercom and will allow you to communicate with the ground crew to rearm and refuel. 1 is for your UHF radio. 2 is for your VHF FM radio. And 3 is for your VHF AM radio. We will leave it in 3 because that is how you communicate with the ATCs. We will turn on our FM radio. There is currently a beacon being broadcast by friendly infantry, which is why we get that tone. I'll go ahead and turn down the volume. We will not worry about this radio at the moment, setting it, but it is the ADF radio that allows you to navigate to beacons of airfields and FARPs. When you turn it on, you may get some static. Go ahead and use the rotary knob on the gain to drop that to where you don't have to hear it. Okay, we'll go ahead and throttle all the way up to max and turn the inverter power to on. You'll notice all the lights in the caution are off, waiting for the RPMs to spool up. The master caution light, go ahead and right click this switch, we'll turn it off. Turn the power on to the radar altimeter. Use this rotary knob to set a minimum altitude which will engage the radar altimeter. Use this knob to set a maximum. If you go outside the confines of these 2 points, you will get an audio warning. We have 60 flares currently loaded on the aircraft. You will need to manually set the rotary knob on the countermeasures panel to 30, as 2 flares are dispersed every time you press the countermeasure button 1 time. Go ahead and arm that. If you have weapons loaded onto the external stations, place this into safe and then in the arm whenever you need to use it. The aircraft is now ready for takeoff and flight. This concludes the startup portion of this refresher course video. I will now cut to in-flight and go over the uses of the 3 navigation radios. We will begin with the VHF FM radio. As I stated earlier, there is a unit on the ground broadcasting on channel 30. The Morse code tone you hear is the signal they are broadcasting. In order to home onto that broadcasting signal, you would need to switch the right rotary knob to home. Doing so, you'll see that these are no longer an X. The top bar at this angle will always be in this position while using the VHF FM radio to home in on a signal. This bar, however, will move from side to side, indicating which side of the aircraft the signal is being received on. Currently, the signal is off my left-hand side as indicated by this line. I will need to turn the aircraft so that the line swings directly into the center and I will be flying at the target. As you can see, the line is swung and is now slightly on the right-hand side. The line is now almost perfectly centered, which means I'm flying towards my signal. Now that I'm aligned with the signal, all I have to do is continue on this path and I'll reach it. None of the three navigation radios give any indication of distance to target, so you must just follow the path until you reach it. In the interest of time, I will not cut the video until I'm closer to the target area. As you can see, we are still on course towards our VHF FM signal. The bar is now beginning to move quickly off to the left, even though I'm still holding the same course, which means I'm closing in on the target. And there you can see the target coming into view now. As you watch the left bar, it moves off far to the left as we get closer and we fly over the target. I will bring us around so that you can see the line swing back to the right and then on into the center. The line is now swung to the right side, indicating that the signal is on my right. As I bring it around and line up with our units on the ground, you'll see the bar line up again with the center. That is how you use the VHF FM radio to navigate to a signal that is being broadcast. Note that the signal must be being broadcast on the frequency. You can't just choose a ground unit's communication frequency and home in on it. They must be actively broadcasting a signal of some type. Next we will cover the ADF and briefly discuss the ILS. I know that the radio frequency for the ILS for the airbase that we just left is 11150. We switch to that now. Should be able to begin hearing the ILS tone. The ILS is used on this as well. There we go. You can hear the ILS. The ILS is done exactly the same as with a fixed-wing aircraft, so I will not cover it in this lesson. You just approach the runway from its runway heading using the ADF, which I'll cover in a minute, to get lined up. And if you're in the glide slope area, the ILS needles will work just as it does in a fixed-wing aircraft. Okay, I know the ADF frequency for the runway that we are close to is 490. In order to get to the 400 range, which is right here, you must right-click this knob once. And then use the mouse wheel to tune in to 490. When you're trying to find a frequency, this is your needle. It tells you the strength of the frequency that you're currently tuned into. The numbers aren't exact, so sometimes you have to fiddle with it. It helps using your situational awareness and knowing the general direction of the runway from you. Here's your needle that the ADF goes off of. Whenever it detects radio frequency and this bar is high, this needle will point to its source. I know that the runway I'm looking for is roughly close to me off my front right. And although this isn't exact, I know that this is probably my runway. So I'm going to turn and follow the course needle and follow it to its destination. Sometimes the needle will act wonky, especially whenever you're just rolling like that. Not sure why it does that, but it does. So just give it a few seconds if it goes crazy, so it'll settle back out, and then continue flying your path. I'm going to go ahead and cut again till we're closer to the target. Okay, we are still on approach towards the ADF frequency point. As you see, our course knob is still direct ahead, and I can see in the distance our runway that we're headed to. This frequency that this needle is pointing us to is the outer, or rather inner, node here. So as we get closer, you'll see the needle begin to spin off right and then point behind us as we pass this location. This is how you can find any runway that has an ADF frequency or a FARP or FOB that's in the mission that someone gave a frequency. As you can see, the needle is now swinging to the right hand side, pointing at our broadcast tower over there. And that is how you fly ADF and VHF FM frequencies to their source. This concludes the CJTF refresher course over the UH-1H aircraft. Weapon systems employment will not be covered in this lesson, as it is pretty basic and straightforward in this aircraft. Thank you for your time and attention.